James Floyd, your host. I'm the author of Star Wars Crossword Puzzles and Other Word Games from a Galaxy Far, Far Away, which is available in the Mysterious Galaxy booth. And I run a podcast called Star Warsologies, where we connect different science and other fields of study with Star Wars. But that's enough about me. We are here to see Corinna Bechko, and she is the author of Star Wars Legacy Volume 2. The Adventures of Han Solo, which was one of the last Dark Horse Comics runs. It was 18 issues of very cool stuff at the very, very end of the Star Wars timeline.
End of the Star Wars timeline, end of the Dark Horse timeline, yes.
Yep, and we'll just get started now. Now I get to put on my glasses. So what is your Star Wars story? How did you first get into Star Wars?
You know, I have the privilege of seeing them in the theater when I was very young, so I guess I don't really remember a time. I remember a time before Star Wars, in that I remember a time when other people were talking about Star Wars, and I was like, when can I see this magical thing? So that's how I got into it, was just watching that and then arguing about whether or not Luke and Leia should be together, and I was like, no, it seems wrong, and it turns out I was right.
You had a good instinct there.
Yes, I figure that means that I'm in the right business, because now I'm a writer, and I figure that proves this is where I should be. Yeah.
Wow. That's good to have that affirmation. That's really cool.
Right? I don't know, that was at age of 7, all downhill after that maybe, but anyways.
Well, how did Star Wars shape your path at all? Obviously, you got you to into writing, but maybe did it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like being introduced to those sorts of interlocking stories that early was important for just thinking about writing, and how stories can be, your inevitable conclusion that is still surprising, and that's still the most important thing about writing. Everybody wants that, it's not satisfying without it. So Star Wars has that in spades for the original trilogy, and I feel like that was important to me.
Yeah, and then did you keep up with Star Wars? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's still, as anything comes out, I'm still, right there. I loved Andor. We've just finished catching up with that, and I'm still, if they're showing it, I will watch it. Sometimes with, questionable results, but I'm always there for it.
Very cool. Yeah, that definitely Andor is so awesome. So how did you get into writing comics specifically?
Yeah, that's, I kind of lucked into it. I'd written a lot of prose, like short stories and stuff, but I've been around comics, and my writing partner on Legacy at the time was my husband, and he did comics, and I was kind of wanted to do a comic, and I had a story that was supposed to be prose, that then I was at San Diego Comic Con years and years and years ago, and it occurred to me, this could be a graphic novel, and I didn't really know how to write a comic, but reading them, I just kind of went for it, and we worked on it, and that became Heathen Town, which is my first published.
Which one was that?
Heathen Town.
Heathen Town.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was an odd duck in a way to have as your first. It was a horror, black and white, and it was put out by Image. So I did not realize at the time how lucky that was, that showed it to them, and they were like, yeah, we want to put this out. And that got me work at Marvel and other places, so
Wow.
I was very fortunate in that.
So how is writing a comic different than writing prose in your view?
It took me a bit to realize you have to really trust the artist is also the co-author. They're telling the story in pictures, and you have to let the art breathe. And I feel like when you're writing prose, all you have is your words. So you're painting a picture with words, and you're not doing that as much with a comic. You are, of course, some is the dialogue, and you're also having to describe things. I had to become a lot less flowery in my delivery, because sometimes artists aren't even from the same background, speaking the same language. Often now, artists are maybe in Argentina or somewhere, and they're using a translation program. So if your script is the way I would write prose, it's not going to work. They're going to get confused, and the most important thing is communicating the story to the artist, and then they're putting what they want on the story too. So the plot and the dialogue are what I need to do, but telling the story in pictures is what they need to do, and I need to get out of their way on that. So it was a learning curve, definitely.
But now you feel like you've got that nailed?
I do. I mean, you should probably ask artists that I've worked with, and I'm respectful of that. But I really try to be, and I try to find out from the artist if they like a fuller script, or if they just want me to call out the details. Or I do a lot of things where I describe what the emotion is, and then I figure the artist will put that as they want. Because, like, I really like. Currently, I recently worked with Danny Luckert, and I would just say things like, she gestured in a way that conveyed her sadness, because he was really good at, even animals, he'd give them these amazing, like, gestural, the dogs are amazing in the book we did together, so I feel like that's important. I need to say what the emotion is in the screen, on the page, and then the artist can figure out how to make that happen.
That's really cool that you have that kind of, not just collaborative, but like, you know, almost like one mind almost, like sharing that is like, hey, this is the feeling, boom.
I mean, when it's working, it's magic. That's what I love about comics.
I think it's been working because, you know, you keep doing comics.
That's true.
Lots of different publishers have been picking you up for different things.
Yeah, I've been lucky, and I've been fortunate in my co-creators too. I'm very lucky that often we've had a good rotating.
Cool. Well, how did Legacy Volume 2 come about?
We were actually asked to do it, which I don't know if that's often the case, but we were doing a lot of work for Dark Horse at the time, and they said, oh, I remember getting this email that was like, do you guys like Star Wars? And yeah, we like Star Wars, so it just came out of that. And they said, well, it's going to be a little different because we don't want you to go to the same places. We don't want you to have any of the same characters. You know, you can have maybe a couple, but we want it to be something totally new. New planets, makeup, characters. What do you think? Would you do this? And yeah, so.
And then when you dove into it, you're like, oh wow, I get to play in the Legacy timeline. Tell us a little bit about that time frame and what it was like to jump in.
You know, I really respect the people that have the harder jobs of fitting things in the little corners and cracks of the continuity. Like, especially, well, now it's getting more like that too, but by the point we were doing the Legacy comics for Dark Horse, it was not only fitting into the continuity of the comics, it was fitting into the continuity of the novels and everything else, and the movies, of course. And sometimes even they would say, oh, you can't do this or that because there's a game element that we didn't even know about because the game isn't out yet. So it was challenging, but because we were at the furthest end of the timeline, at least we knew theoretically what had gone before. But for people that were in the center of it, that was, my hat is off to them. That was not always the easiest thing. So it was good though for us because in a way, having all of that other stuff to build on, it let us have the freedom to craft the ideas that we wanted to work on and then fit them, sort of mold them, but not have to be beholden to anything. Unlike where you have to make both the beginning and the middle and the end stitch up with something else.
That makes me wonder, is like, were there some things that you wanted to do and then you're told, no, that's verboten?
Yeah, there definitely were. I mean, the big one is everybody always says, how is Anya Solo, how is she related? We were absolutely not allowed to even hint at how she was related. That was going to be covered by somebody else somewhere else, and it never was. But that means that we didn't get to know either.
Cool. Well, let's since you brought up Anya, and we have her on the cover of number 1. What went into creating her?
And we thought a lot about what goes into Star Wars and what makes Star Wars feel like Star Wars. And of course, she's a solo, but we wanted to make her feel a little bit rebellious and in kind of fit in with that sort of family, but also we wanted her to be her own person. So we really thought a lot, and actually that was the element that we talked about the most, and with our editor too, Randy Stradley, I know he's been at this convention before, about how to make her seem authentic. And we thought a lot about, I mean, there's a ton of backstory kind of just about how I thought of like where she'd been in her life, who she'd met, the experiences she'd had that never were on the page, but they were important just to me for imagining how she was and why she would react as she was.
And so you guys made the choice, let's start her off as a junk dealer, which is kind of appropriate for someone, solo. It's like, yeah, we're back to like the farm boy roots from Luke, but also it's like, scavenger, she's just trying to survive, just make some money. So, was there anything in particular that, and I guess with also the junk dealer that she's got to ship, that, so, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the junk dealer aspect, I just figured that felt very Star Wars to me, because there's always scavengers and bits of tech and putting things together and making things work, and just also that way she'd know a little bit about a lot of different things, and be very working class. Like I always liked about Star Wars that these people were not like kings and queens necessarily. Of course, we have a princess, but for the most part, they're just people trying to live their lives and make the most of it. And that's very attractive to me.
Well, one of the characters that is definitely just trying to live his life and make the most of it is Anya's friend Zog. Tell us a little bit about him and what went into creating him.
He was one of my favorite characters, and still one of my favorite characters I've ever written for. I just love that he's such a sad, but like he strives and he's funny and he doesn't always get taken seriously because he kind of looks like a fish, but he's trying to make the best of it, and just between, now that Dark Horse can't tell me what to do about this book anymore, I can say that one thing we really wanted was for them to be the friends that eventually became romantically involved, like towards the end, and they said absolutely not no romance with a fish. So unfortunately, we had to find another romantic angle for her. But,
I feel like they did have a romance. But
yeah, later I think they loosened up and weren't quite so specious, but.
So was there a particular aspect of Moncala? I see your tattoo here.
Oh yes.
Is that just a novice?
This is an ammonite. I guess I should. Yeah, it's an ammonite eating a trilobite with some crime noise in the background. My other job is I'm a fossil preparator, and I work at the Natural History Museum with fossils. So this is just a nod to a bit of the history of what used to be.
So does Sock as a Moncal play into your love of prehistoric sea creatures?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, any book that I write, I love to put creatures of all kinds, sentient and non-sentient. So, yeah, he's a special dude to me, just because I feel like he's probably the most together person in this book. That's really, like, if I had to rely on anybody, I'd rely on him. He's I don't know why they wouldn't want him to be her romantic partner, but oh well.
Their loss. One of the other characters that really sticks out is the Imperial Knight Zhao Assam. What went into making him and kind of having him be, at first you don't think he's going to be a main character, and then he really grows into being a key part of the stories.
Yeah, he actually demanded to be a bigger part. We originally we were going to have him in there as like, well, we need to balance this and have, for this point in time, it's important to have some representation for this part of what's going on in the galaxy. And yeah, as soon as he came on the scene, he just sort of said to me, no, I need to be central to this story. So we had to accommodate that.
So what makes him tick?
I think he's a very good person, but the way that he comes at things is very different from the other characters there. And I think he's chosen a path in life that maybe he sees as not as, he maybe thinks that like this happened and now I go forward. And he has a code and all of this, and I think he willfully chooses sometimes to make things, he makes things come up to his level, sort of. He's one of those people that, why isn't the world fitting into what I want? Well, I'm gonna have to try to make it that way, because that's how it should be, which we need people like that, obviously. I think his path is a little more difficult than others.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Anya's past. That she kind of goes through things, but how is she growing and changing as things keep happening?
Yeah, I think, well, like in classic Star Wars fashion, I hope anytime you go out into a wider world, you end up seeing that things maybe don't fit your preconceived notions. So I think that as the book goes along, hopefully, you're seeing her make some different decisions and think about her found family and make decisions that benefit everybody and the wider galaxy. Kind of her circle of what she cares about.
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning, it just seems like her and Sock, and then it's like, oh, we're adding a new member. And
right.
One of those is the assassin from AG-37, and he's like, it's like they took IG-11 from, and then it's just like, no, this is it. AG is like the original IG-11.
Yeah, it's funny how a lot of these things kind of echo or rhyme throughout. I guess they're just ideas that work well in this universe. But yeah, he was actually a lot of fun too, because, well, everybody wants to write a droid that is, just takes nonsense and is ready for the action, but isn't really thinking of it like a human would think of it.
And he's got a mysterious past a little bit.
He does, and actually we had planned another arc that had been okayed, and we were going to do a lot of stuff with him that would involve flashbacks, and then we would have woven it together a little bit with some of the other parts of Legacy, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what everybody's fans of, but we had to instead cut the arc or do it short and kind of cram a lot into the last few issues to finish the story. At least they let us finish the story, but we did not get to do his whole backstory.
Yeah, that if you don't recall it, that he has memories of like Luke and Leia and Han, and it would be really interesting. Like, why does he have those memories? Was he really there, or yeah? So there's a lot of questions, and some people thought that he was like R2D2 reincarnated.
And I've heard C3PO. I've heard people just absolutely convinced that he was C3PO too, and that was not our plan. But I figure now that it's not ever going to happen, and whatever people choose to believe about it, death of the author, I guess. Right,
Well, on the other side, one of the key adversaries is Darth Red, and he's kind of a different take on the Sith. That so why him? What goes into making him?
It's in a universe as rich as the Star Wars mythos, it gets difficult to come up with a new take on a character. So usually, what I do, what we did back then too, was just try to think of them as people and just like, why would somebody choose this path? What would they, obviously personal gain, but it's still a hard path. Like, it's gotta be hard to always be trying to strive for what? But so we tried to think a lot about what his code would be, and that he would have a code too, but it's not like our hero's code. So we just thought a lot about how this particular person would act, rather than trying to think about what would a Sith do or something like that.
Yeah. So and it turns out in the end that his whole plan is to wipe out all the Sith, and not because he wants to be the remaining Sith. But I don't know. You want to mention what's?
Yeah, like it's funny when we actually, there was going to be further also. That was also going to tie in with the next arc that would have had so much else with the flashbacks and stuff. So we were trying to figure out a way to get it so that he would actually have a plan that benefit himself and also his wider ideas. So it was more of instead of just like, haha, I'm evil, or haha, I have a plan, or alternately like, oh, this is what I'm doing because my mom said something. Like, we really wanted him to have a sort of a philosophy. Like everybody I think everybody in the book sort of has their own philosophy, whether they would acknowledge it or
Speaking of, we had to, or you had to bring it all in that when Dark Horse had to end their run on Star Wars because it was shifting over to Marvel. Luckily, you got to finish the story, but how much wrapping in did you feel like you had to do, and did that change your overall idea of some of these characters? Like, we got to wrap it up because it sounds like Darth Red. It's like we got to wrap this up, and maybe that changed.
Yeah, like his plan was supposed to unfold over the next arc, honestly. So what happens here was a lot of like almost origami folding, because yeah, when Dark Horse lost the license, it was a big surprise. I was actually out at lunch with a friend, a member of my writing group. We're talking about writing. I get in the car, I turn on NPR, and I hear that Marvel had the license now. So then, oh my gosh, write to my editor, and he's like, we just found out too, and really quick scramble. So it was like an immediate, like, head home, okay, we've got to jigger everything in this outline. Like, we had a whole outline that was ready to go. Like, well, let's see what we can do. Okay, we can get you a couple more issues.
So how many more arcs did you think you had before?
I've learned to never count on that for comics, but we were definitely planning at least one more. And of course, it's always, how does it sell, and that kind of thing.
Right.
But we were locked down to go for one more at least.
Wow. That was sad that we never get to see.
I think so. But
we've got some teases here that Darth Red, maybe some with AG.
Yeah.
So we can imagine our own adventures.
Yeah, exactly. Like I guess it's up to anybody that reads it now can just imagine where it would go.
And what was it like writing? The Legacy universe was pretty wide open, but there were some key things. You had the Imperial Knights, you had the destruction of Dak, which obviously plays in a big role.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't ignore that. I mean, that seems so dramatic.
Yeah, and then this idea of triumvirate, kind of running the galaxy. What was it like to play with those, work around those?
I will say the triumvirate was a lot more challenging than other universes I've worked in that have a more more of a system where it's either light and dark or evil and good, and having three was the balancing act there is interesting because you have to make sure that they all have their own thing that they want and how do alliances form. It was very interesting to try to do that. Sometimes you get in the weeds because somebody else had done something else earlier and it shifted the balance. But yeah, being in the very end, like you said, made it a lot easier because it's sort of like, well, all of those things that went before, this is where it's ended up, and I get to say where it ended up. So
yeah, it kind of put Empress fell. Like, oh my God.
yeah. I figure if you're gonna use royalty, you should use your royalty.
Yeah, one of the things you brought in, you hinted at the beginning, is that Anya is wanted for something, and then we later find out it's for she's being framed for the murder of an Imperial Knight. What was that like? Just like going forward, is like, okay, we planted a seed here. Did you already have that in mind of what she was going to be wanted for? Or?
We did. We didn't know exactly how it would play out, but when we pitched that, we did say it would be an Imperial Knight, and that it would be a frame-up. So they knew that going in, because of course everything had to be signed off on by Lucasfilm too. Like they had rules that sometimes would catch you off guard. Like absolutely no Force ghosts was one of them. Like you couldn't touch it. You couldn't talk about them. Like you couldn't put them in. And I think they were going to do something someplace else, but it was just, even so, they were like, we don't want them shown in the comics. Okay.
Well, that seems maybe easy to work
Yeah,
with,
I mean,
especially with the characters you had.
Yeah, we didn't have anything where we wanted to use one exactly, but it was just sort of one of those things where they tell you no, and then you're like, oh wait, now I want it. But at the same time, think they were maybe smart because some things like that, it's a special thing and you don't want to ruin it. Like, you don't want everybody to, oh yeah, there's that, you know, Uncle Henry's a horse race now or whatever, you know.
Uncle Harlow.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. So what were overall some of your key highlights of getting to work on Legacy that you look back on and you're like, I'm so glad we did this?
Well, I mean, first and foremost was just, I remember when Randy asked us to do it, and we said yes, and we signed the contract. It was just like, I'm going to work on Star Wars, you know. Which, that's obviously like a high point. Like, not that many people get to work on Star Wars. It's an amazing honor to get to do that, and also a heavy, like, sort of right after that came the low of I have to live up to working on Star Wars. So that was difficult, but aside from that, it was having the freedom to design and create the Cirque Nebula, whatever, like things that hadn't been in the universe there before, and now was really exciting for me.
What are some of those things that you created and then you see, you know, since you've been keeping track of Star Wars, like, oh hey, that's a lot like what I created?
Well, you know, the big one was a junk planet,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a coincidence, but I had so many people write to me and come up to me in cons and go, they took your idea. And I was like, I think that's a free idea that probably a lot of people have, but that was a bizarre one, because I was just like, it's a woman who deals in junk? What?
I don't know who that is, but
Oh, like in the, yeah. Like, wait.
Well, you've written in a lot of other shared universes. You've gotten an Eisner nomination for Green Lantern Earth 1. You've done The Expanse, Once Upon a Time, Avatar. So what's your experience on writing in shared universes, and which other ones are you especially proud of?
You know, I have done quite a few. Avatar was interesting because James Cameron personally reads everything related to Avatar. So I would send off a script, and then I'd have to wait for James Cameron to read it and before I was allowed to go forward. And there were little bits in there, like the Avatar universe doesn't have drones. And there were story points where I was like, oh, a drone, because there's other flying things, and no drones. So it's just, there's odd things like that. But
so when is your Avatar comic set?
It's sort of like, I get to use Grace, so it's like a prequel-y thing, kind of, so, but it's a funny thing because it had to also work with video games and all of that. And I also got to write The Expanse, and that story had to fit in between 2 seasons, so 4 and 5. So that was a similar thing where I had to go to the studio and watch the upcoming season, but they hadn't put in any of the special effects yet, so it was all like these scenes with then just people like on wires and stuff, and it was but I had to get the story points so that I could make things fit together. But it was different for them though, because those folks, they were like, yeah, write what you want. We like to have many viewpoints, and they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. They really didn't, as long as it didn't say something horrible about one of the characters, they were like, yeah, do what you want. So very different experiences.
So, but did the authors that collectively, or James has the authority, did they read your stuff and comment, or?
They didn't read, they just kind of went, okay. Like, they were very hands-off. Like, my understanding is they did read it to make sure it was like, okay, like there wasn't anything offensive or something, but yeah, they did not, it was not at all like working with Avatar, or like times I worked with Disney, for instance, and not anything like that.
What Disney stuff?
Aladdin, I did a thing, and I learned that Disney has a vice president of princesses that has to sign off on every story that has a princess, which was an interesting, who knew? But yeah, apparently you have to run every princess through this person to make sure that it upholds the princess guild of Disney or whatever. So.
Wow, there's something on LinkedIn to look up. Vice President of Princesses.
I know, I always kind of wanted to, and it was a guy, I'm pretty sure, because the name, at least the name on the email was like John or something. And I was always like, how does he introduce himself at parties?
I am the king of Disney princesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I guess more like the grand vizier.
Right, yes.
Wow. And then you also did your own stuff. You got a Hugo nomination for The Invisible Republic.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. I read it when it came out. I was really bummed that it ended when it did.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a little bit more of that plan too. But yeah, that was a great experience. That's another, obviously I like to write about space. And that was about a planet that had used generation ships to get there. So it was very far from Earth and it was kind of off on its own, and a revolution that was going on there. So a little bit more gritty, sort of, I call it poly sci-fi, so more political. But yeah, that was completely creative.
Very cool. One of the other ones that you've done in space is The Space Between.
Oh, yeah.
What would you tell us about? Oh, yeah. Here's The Invisible Republic. She has copies of that.
Yeah, sorry.
And then The Space Between. Tell us about The Space Between.
Yeah, so The Space Between was very recent. I just did it for Boom. And speaking of generation ships, it's set on a generation ship. So every chapter is a different generation and a different romance and a different revolution. So obviously the people that started from Earth, as the generations go on, they didn't ask to be on this ship. Like the people that got on the ship, yes. The people 3 generations in, the rules set down on Earth don't make a lot of sense for them anymore. So as the journey progresses, we see what becomes important to people, what they're willing to fight for, and how the various earlier revolutions on board have affected the future people. So you get to see the entire journey from Earth to their new home, but it's over the course of many hundreds of years.
Wow. I sense a theme here. We got space, we got revolutions.
Space revolutions, yeah, epic space, I think, is the thing there. Yeah, and always a lot of animals. There's cats are very important in The Space Between. If anybody's a Cats in Space fan.
Very cool. So it looks like Star Wars definitely kind of planted those seeds, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think Star Wars, especially seeing it at such a young age, and I always loved science fiction, and definitely that's been my home for my entire writing career.
Well, one of your other homes is horror. So tell us a little bit about your career in horror comics.
I do love to write horror. I just brought this is the newest. It's called Blood Type, and it's about a vampire on a tropical island. So she is where you wouldn't expect a vampire to be. She's kind of there by happenstance, and she's just trying to make her way in the world. She doesn't really care if she hurts people in the process, but she's not trying to hurt people. But there's something, well, I mean, aside from, killing them, but that's only specific people. She doesn't want to hurt everybody all at once. But something much worse is on the island, and she has to contend with that. And not going out in the sun at a resort.
Well, I don't know. I guess if you act like the crazy eccentric that just lives in a resort, that maybe that works. I don't know.
I mean, I think if, I grew up in a beach community, and there was a lot of going to the beach and hanging out by the bonfire and staying up late and sleeping through the sunniest parts. So, yeah, it can be done.
So is this an autobiographical story?
Well, I hope not, but definitely growing up in a resort community and seeing the sort of darker underside of some of that from living there did definitely contribute.
Interesting. And have you also lived on a generation ship by any chance?
Not yet, but it could happen.
Would you want to?
Probably not. I love the earth and being here and seeing I love the biosphere, I guess I should say. So I think I would have a hard time giving up on fossils and lizards and cats and things like that.
Do you think there would be cool fossils on other planets though to check out?
I'm hoping Mars might have some.
So tell us about your work as a fossil preparator.
Preparator, yeah, it's Google always tells me I'm spelling it wrong Institute, but, and we dig them up and put them in plaster jackets and bring them back to the lab, and I clean them up and put them back together if they're broken, and then they either go for research or they go on display. Right now, at the Natural History Museum, there's a big green dinosaur named Natalie that's just put on display, and I spent about 6-7 years working on her.
Wow.
It's actually not her today. I always, Natalie, but it's spelled with a G, and it's made up of many different individuals. So, canonically, Natalie is they. I can't get that wrong, somebody did that.
I'm still working on Natalie with a G.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, it's a pun, because the place where we excavated was full of gnats, and it's very, very, very full of gnats. So.
Poor Natalie.
I know, right? Yeah.
So what kind of creature is she?
Sauropod, Diplodocus. So one of the long-tailed, very, very long tail.
And so, reconstructing Natalie from part, wow, it's like a Frankenstein.
Yes, it actually has 7 different, and we think probably new species as well. But a lot of them, it's amazing, an animal that big, they were all swept into this one flood channel. It must have been quite the flood to knock these things that had big, columns of legs and just.
Wow. So that's at the LA Natural History Museum?
That's right, LA Natural History Museum for folks who are visiting or live here.
Cool. What other types of fossils have you gotten to play with?
Oh gosh, right now I'm working on ichthyosaurs, which are the big, they look like a reptilian dolphin, sort of. Some of them are huge. And I'm working on possibly a new species. It was something that some researcher found as a boulder, about like this, it looked like a little boulder. And they saw just a little bit of baby bone, and I started cleaning it. The skull is in there. The boulder had just formed around the skull. So I've been using it's almost like a little jackhammer to get this very hard rock off. But yeah, this thing had been in this boulder it was already a fossil when T-Rexes were walking around it, so.
That's really cool. I'm sorry, we're just going to move on and talk about prehistoric life now for the rest
Well,
of the
it's a
panel.
fascinating, to me it's fascinating.
I don't know, have you ever incorporated your work as a fossil preparator into your storytelling?
Yeah, I think it goes into everything, really. I mean, my degree is in zoology, and I have animals, and even in legacy, there's a ton of animals in there. So I always try to think what the ecology of wherever I'm writing that would be. So I think a lot of that goes into it.
Yeah, I remember on the Junk Planet, there's these rats that are kind of scary, but they're not like super scary. So
Yeah, I always try to think of animals as animals. Like it's an individual, it's got its reasons, and it's, when I write monsters, they have the reasons, they're just trying to get along, and sometimes that means they're eating people and dissolving them with acid or something, but they're still a creature. At least that's how I approached, I did Alien book a while back too. Yeah, I tried to just approach them as creatures with wants and needs, which I think most of the alien stories do.
what about your Once Upon a Time stuff?
Oh yeah, that was, speaking of Marvel, right? Yeah, that was an odd one, but yeah, I did 2 volumes of that. And that had to also really fit into continuity, and oh boy, the notes on that were insane. Because it had to go through many different kinds of precedents of various things, I think, so.
Are there any other works that you really want to talk about?
Yeah, recently, speaking of horror, I've been doing a lot more horror. So I've done a lot of work for EC Comics, which those were the thing that kind of got the comics code going. People who are familiar with comics, that the reason why we had to start saying, oh no, think of the children type of thing. So at this point, they brought them back. It's with full agreement with the family of the original license holder, and I've done 9 stories for them now, but they're all like little anthologies. So, yeah, I'm really happy with those. If people want tiny little stories about gruesome things, then please check this out.
Tiny stories of gruesome things. Wow, tell us a little bit about your prose
of anthologies especially. And coming up, I will have a short in Shakespeare adjacent, and it's a take on some of his sonnets, but it is about a quote-unquote monster that maybe is more of a creature on, you guessed it, a spaceship.
Wow, that's definitely matching
To
some
bring
things
it all
together.
the way home,
Bringing it
right?
back, the poetry of space.
Yes, it's always about space.
So what kinds of other things are you working on, or what are things that inspire you and would you love to work on?
Oh, what I'd love to work on. Gosh, I've been so lucky in the types of things I've worked on. I've always said that I would love to write some Max Headroom. I don't know who has that, but I just feel like more and more that would be such a fun thing to try to update if I was working in another licensed property. But other than that, I have a couple of stories that I'd love to tell myself about. One about a haunted house and another about a spaceship.
You want to explain Max Headroom for some people in this
Yeah,
audience
people
that
probably.
weren't around then.
Yeah, this is a very old thing, and it's I don't even. It was billed as being, I think, like 15 minutes in the future or something, but it's this very dystopian thing where there's kind of a wayward, I guess, a rogue. I don't think you'd almost say an AI as much as I dislike the modern iteration of that, but that would pop up in different screens and kind of help the people that were trying to get out from under the thumb of this. Well, it's about a revolution, I guess I should say first. Yeah, so it's its own weird thing. So
Yeah, I remember a couple episodes of this
yeah.
show.
Yeah, it's definitely nothing that people will be familiar with now. So I think it's right for an update.
I'm sure Pepsi would be really glad.
I think so. I want that sweet Pepsi one. Yeah.
Pepsi, Max Headroom is also a spokesperson for Pepsi.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. You would not have expected it to become this revolutionary character.
Any other things you want to share?
Oh gosh, I have some books if anybody wants to check them out. I'm on Table R,
Yeah.
and I'm here today only. So, and if you have anything that you want to sign, I'm happy to sign.
Yeah, but go check it out. She's right across from the Mysterious Galaxy booth. We'll open it up to questions from folks in the audience. Just raise your hand. And all right, how about you?
Do you have any regrets or anything you would have done differently as a writer?
Oh gosh, regrets. Story-wise or career-wise?
Story-wise?
Story-wise, I think there's probably some things I could have pushed harder on to try to get them to maybe either go farther or push back on some things. But otherwise, I feel like usually once something's done, I try not to go back and go, how would I have revised it? Because I feel in that direction lies madness. Like
The George Lucas special editions.
yeah, exactly. Because it's so easy to fix things, and I see this a lot even with artists working digitally. That back when you just had pen and ink, you just do it. But now you can look so small. And I was just talking to a friend about this, about how he's like, I wish you couldn't see the little flaws that no one else could see, but when you go far in. So I kind of try to only be scared of the future and not regret the past, if that makes sense.
Good morning. How do you avoid confusion when you're working, like the confusion between Legacy, the Dark Horse, and the Legacy of the Force, which was about the the war between the Dark Titus and the rest of the galaxy, pretty much, and also confusion between Alana Solo and Anya Solo?
Luckily now that I'm not working in that anymore, I just leave that to everybody else, and I'm like, hopefully they'll like it well enough to figure it out. But at the time, we had pages and pages of what other things were doing and what had been done, and just sort of trees of where other characters had been. And since we were far enough in the future of that timeline, it was relatively easy to just go off in a different direction. whereas people that were working further back in that timeline had a much harder time. But for us, it wasn't that bad. It was more just having to make sure that things went in a direction that wouldn't interfere with what somebody else was probably going to do.
Back there.
Hi, is there any like clubs that like Star Wars women or like writers can join? I'm working on a graphic novel and I'm studying animation. So at college. But I just wanted to know if there's any resources that you could name, perhaps?
Well, for Star Wars specifically, or just in general for writing?
But like science fiction.
Science fiction? Yeah, there's actually quite a few different organizations, both professional and like more, I don't know, relaxed, that you can join. Personally, I found it really valuable to have a small, intimate group of friends who are also writers, who I can rely on to read my stuff and be both kind and gentle, but also tell me the truth. I think that's really important, but what you don't want is anybody that's negative or trying to tell you don't do something. And if you find, even if they're your best friend and they start telling you, no, I think you should quit this story, they're not in a writing club. Get rid of, you keep them as a friend, but kick them out of the writing club, because that's not going to do your writing any good.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Oh, I was just going to ask if the expanded universe was to continue and come back, is there any other era or any other story you feel that hasn't been told that you think needs to be told?
Well, I mean, the amazing thing about Star Wars is there's a million stories. Like, if anything in this modern era has told us is we can do stuff for kids and we can do stuff for, adults about a revolution, and there's a million stories that can be told. So, I mean, personally, I'd love to see a story that more centered on somebody who actually had to deal with some of the animals. Like, I think that'd be really fun, but I don't know if anybody would do that, but...
A Jason Solo story, buddy?
Sure.
There you go.
Well, I know that we have a Star Wars, the creatures of the EU. It has a much cuter title than I can.
Yes, what is the, I know, so I can picture the cover.
Star Wars.
Well, the Star Wars bestiary is an awesome book. I was thinking of a panel here that's this afternoon.
Oh, the panel, yes, I will be on that panel.
Yes.
Talking about, specifically.
Life forms of legends.
Yes, and talking about the science behind some of the
Yeah.
creatures, and yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good thing. Thanks for bringing that up. So
Yeah,
it's long.
yeah, good, that was a good transition.
That actually, what time is that at? It is at 1:20. Yeah, we'll have some other excellent people. We have a question way in the back.
Sorry to ask you this, but do you have an agent or do you just?
No, I don't. I never have. I just kind of float along and hope work comes to me, and sometimes I pitch if somebody's accepting, and I just hope for the best.
Because people say, oh, you have to make 5-minute movie of your work, go on this website, specific things, sometimes.
Yeah, the funny thing is, no actual writers I know actually do those things much. I mean, you can, and I'm sure it's helpful. I am far too disorganized and shy to do those things, so I just kind of do what I do and hope for the best.
Okay, one last question here.
Okay, a question about the Sith. So when you were developing the stories, did you have pretty much free reign on what kind of Sith you can develop? Or if the story continued, would there have been more Sith?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we actually had a lot of latitude. So I think that, I'm not sure when it left Dark Horse, I believe it got a lot more locked down. So like, if it had continued, I bet it would have been a lot more locked down, because it would have been under a different purview. But I mean, we were actually, aside from these very specific, like, no Force ghosts, and you have to go to planets that we haven't seen before, we didn't have a lot of interference sounds harsh, but interference.
All right. Can I have one more question? Okay, right there.
Hi, I was just curious. You mentioned earlier when it came to your Star Wars comics that you like tried to focus on just keeping it with the one arc, maybe hoping for another, but not necessarily sure you're gonna have that. How do you go about like balancing that when it comes to writing comics? Like wanting to tell more fully fleshed stories, but knowing that there's a possibility that you might not be able to do that.
You know, that is actually a thing I always try to, like, it's difficult because you don't know, and then you're like, well, I don't want to finish it up so that they definitely don't give it to me. I was trying to seed in some extra little, like, little mysteries that maybe don't really matter, or little details, and like, I've done that, like, even in Blood Tech, and I just, that way, I hope it's satisfying. There's little threads to pull on when people are reading it. They might go, oh, what's that? And if there's no more for me, they can think about it. If it's a sticky enough story, they want to think about it more, they can wonder about that. And if it goes on, then there's something to build on, or at least build a bridge to.
That was a really good question.
Yeah.
We are out of time, but as you mentioned before, you can come visit Corinna at her booth, booth R, and then she'll be on the Life Forms of Legends panel coming up at 1:20. And thank you so much. Let's give her a big round.